All right, let's get into it. Today we're diving into what might be the most ambitious and honestly the most controversial rulebook ever written for the internet. I'm talking about the UK's Online Safety Act. This thing is huge, and it's designed to completely change how we all experience the online world. So let's break down what it really means.
I mean, really think about it. You're scrolling, you're posting, you're sharing stuff all day long. But when you come across something harmful or illegal, whose job is it, really, to keep that space safe? Is it on you? Is it on the platform? The government? That's the core question the UK is trying to answer here.
And their answer, in a nutshell, is the Online Safety Act. It's this brand new legal framework that puts the responsibility pretty much squarely on the shoulders of the online platforms themselves.
And here's the absolute key takeaway. This law isn't just about playing whack-a-mole, taking down bad posts one by one. No, it's about forcing companies to design their platforms, their actual algorithms, their moderation policies, the whole shebang, to be safer from the ground up. It's a huge shift from being reactive to being proactive.
Okay, so who's actually on the hook here? Which companies have to follow all these new rules? Well, you might be surprised just how wide the net is cast. It affects a lot more services than you'd probably think.
So the law breaks it down into two big buckets. First, you've got user-to-user services. That covers everything from the giants like Instagram and TikTok, all the way down to a small blog with a comment section, or even online games with a chat function. Then you have search services. Think Google. Basically, if people can post stuff and other people can see it on your site, yeah, you're probably covered by this law.
And this part is a really big deal. This law has a global reach. It doesn't matter if your company is based in California or anywhere else in the world. If you have what the law calls links to the UK, which basically just means you have a decent number of users there, you have to play by these rules. Okay, now this is where it gets interesting. The Act doesn't treat every platform the same. It's definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach. The biggest, highest-risk services get labeled Category 1. Think of the major social media sites. They face the longest list of duties, things like cracking down on fraudulent ads and offering user verification. Then you have other categories for big search engines or messaging apps, and they have slightly different jobs to do. It's kind of like the old saying, right? With great power comes great responsibility. So what do these platforms actually have to do? Well, the whole thing is really built on three main pillars, three fundamental duties that these services now have to follow.
It all boils down to these three big duties. First, they have a duty to tackle illegal content. Second, there's a very specific, very detailed duty to protect children. And third, a brand new duty to empower adults with more control over what they see.
First up, tackling illegal content. This is the absolute baseline for every single service regulated by the Act. They have to figure out the risk of the most serious illegal stuff appearing on their site, what the law calls priority illegal content. And we're talking about the absolute worst stuff you can find online, like terrorism content, child exploitation material, or even threats to kill. They need to have systems ready to stop users from seeing it and to get it down fast.
All right, pillar number 2, protecting kids. Now, this is where it starts to get, well, a lot more complicated. The law doesn't just vaguely say, protect children. Nope. It creates this super detailed, three-tiered system for content that, while legal for adults, could be really harmful to a child. And this slide shows you the crucial difference. For the most harmful stuff, the primary priority content, like pornography or material that promotes self-harm, the duty is to prevent kids from ever seeing it. But for other stuff, like bullying, the duty is to protect them from the risk of seeing it. Now, that might sound like they're just splitting hairs with words, but believe me, the legal difference is massive. See, prevented is a super high bar to clear. It's pretty much an absolute standard. I mean, how do you stop a child from ever seeing something? The only real way to do that is to have a rock-solid age gate. And that's why this whole law is basically forcing platforms to start using what it calls highly effective age-checking systems. This could be a total game changer for how we access big parts of the internet. And that brings us to the third pillar, giving adults more power. Now, the original plan to censor so-called legal but harmful content for everybody was, let's just say, really controversial. So the final law pivots. Instead of just banning that stuff, the law says, hey, for the biggest platforms, you've got to give the adult user the tools to filter this kind of stuff out of their own feed if they don't want to see it. It really puts the control back in your hands.
Right, so you've got all these new rules, but who's going to make sure this all actually happens? Who's going to enforce them? Well, it turns out the UK has a new sheriff in town for the internet.
And that sheriff is Ofcom, the UK's communications regulator. And you have to understand its role here.
Ofcom is not going to be some kind of content cop, deciding if your specific meme is okay or not. It's a systems auditor. Their job is to pop the hood on these tech giants and see if their safety systems and processes are actually strong enough to do what the law says.
And let me tell you, Ofcom has some serious teeth. We're talking big ones. If a company doesn't comply, the fines are just staggering. Up to £18 million or 10% of their entire global revenue for the year, whichever one is higher. For companies like Meta or Google, that could mean fines in the billions. This is designed to make online safety a board-level issue, not just a PR one.
And it's not just the big companies that are on notice. The law also closes some pretty glaring loopholes by creating new crimes for individuals. For example, stuff like cyberflashing, which, believe it or not, was a legal gray area before, or deliberately encouraging someone to self-harm, those are now specific criminal offenses in the UK.
So when you put all this together, it brings us to the massive central debate here, the one that's been raging since the beginning of the internet. How do you balance this huge push for safety with the fundamental right to free speech?
You know, the people who wrote the law, they knew this was going to be a problem. The Act literally has sections in it that require the biggest platforms to protect content of democratic importance. They're supposed to make sure that a diversity of political opinions is taken into account when they're making decisions about what to take down. But of course, there's a counterargument. Critics, like the Open Rights Group, say that these protections are not applied equally. They point out that because of a lot of lobbying, registered news publishers get special treatment. You know, faster appeals if their content gets taken down. And this could create a two-tiered system for speech. So a journalist could say something and be protected, but if you or I said the exact same thing, we might not be. Okay, so let's cut through all the legal jargon. After all this technical detail, what does this actually mean for you when you're just browsing the web or scrolling through your phone?
Well, you're definitely going to start seeing some real changes. First off, get ready to prove your age more often to get into certain sites or see certain content. On the big social media apps, you're going to see new filters and tools that give you way more control over your feed. And you can bet that every platform's terms of service is about to get a whole lot longer and more detailed.
Look, at the end of the day, the Online Safety Act is a massive, world-first experiment. The UK has drawn a line in the sand and decided that the Wild West days of the internet are over. But it leaves us all with this huge question. As we build these higher walls to create a safer internet, what are we walling out in the process? That's the trade-off the entire world is going to be watching.